we're going to combine the experiences of two program directors and how they work with host sites, along with looking at resources that are available within the Encore collection. The webinar is guided by 5 questions that I think you saw in an email that announced this webinar. We will leave time at the end for questions. We hope that you'll leave with ideas on effective practices for working with host sites, as well as access to supporting resources. Well, let's begin by introducing our 2 presenters. With us online is Melissa Burwell. She is the Program Director for the Minnesota Alliance with Youth Promise Fellows Program. So Melissa, could you share a little bit about your program?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am obviously based in Minnesota, and we have a core of 60 AmeriCorps members who serve in schools and community organizations, and in particular, they are working to address the achievement gap and civic engagement gap. And so we have anywhere from 35 to 45 host sites that we recruit and work with and place our members at across the state in both rural and urban settings.
Excellent, thank you. Also with us today is Kristen Ball. She too is the Program Director for the Illinois Public Health AmeriCorps program. Kristen, please share a little bit about your program.
Okay, hi everybody. IPHA's AmeriCorps program is based out of Springfield, Illinois, but we are a statewide program, and each year we place about 20 full-time AmeriCorps members in urban and rural settings throughout Illinois. And our host sites include health departments, healthcare centers, and other community-based agencies that provide health services and education. And our members focus on either going into schools and providing health education to children. They run after-school programs with teens. And then a lot of our members also work with the local health departments on emergency preparedness. The health departments in the state of Illinois are in charge of coming up with plans for what to do in case of like the pandemic flu outbreak, or if there was a bioterrorism attack in Illinois. And so a lot of our members also work with their health departments on making sure their counties are safe in those kinds of events.
Thank you. We're going to forego the opportunity for you guys to introduce yourselves. Instead, we're just going to launch right into the webinar. If you do have a question, it's nice for you to state your name and even the name of your program. But let's look at our guiding questions for this webinar. Again, Kristen and Melissa will share their experiences around these 5 questions. How do I identify and recruit potential hosts? What should my application procedure cover? How do I develop host site agreements? How do I conduct site visits and track performance? And lastly, how do I evaluate sites at the end of the year? We'll also take a look at some of the resources available within the Encore collection. And I'm going to head to the Encore collection right now. Hopefully you've run across this set of resources. If not, you will receive a follow-up email after this webinar that will have links to this collection, along with any resources that we discuss that are not part of the collection. So don't worry about taking notes or trying to capture the URL. We will be providing that information after this webinar. So what is Encore? Encore is a collection of field-tested resources for supporting members throughout their cycle of service. We have resources and information within these 5 strands of recruitment, orientation, supervision, ongoing training and member development, and helping members transition after their year of service. Today what we'll look at is a section within the supervision strand on working with host sites. So let's start with the first question. How do I identify and recruit potential hosts? Now, Kristen, you have site criteria that you use. Mm-hmm. So we'll let you start this conversation by telling us about that and other aspects of how you identify and recruit potential hosts. While you're speaking, I'll pull up your document.
Great. As I mentioned, our program is statewide, and so we do have several factors that we take into account when we look for our host site agencies. And the first one we look at is actually the location of where they are at. We want to make sure that, we don't get all of our host sites in the northern part of the state or the central part of the state. We want to make sure that the host site agencies are located throughout the state and that they are also spread between some urban locations and some rural locations. And just to make sure that, we aren't placing our AmeriCorps members at agencies where that particular location already has a lot of services available to the communities. The second thing we look at is the recruitment potential for that particular site. Would that area have a large population that we could draw from? And is there a community college or a large university near that city where we might be able to pull people from? The majority of our AmeriCorps members are recent college grads, or they are getting their master's degree in a public health field. So we have really benefited from having our host sites in a location that does have a college nearby. The next thing we look at is the member position description. We have each of our host sites fill out an application that does list what the member would be doing and what their need is for this member. We just want to make sure that the host sites have really thought about what the member is going to be doing and that there would be enough work for this person to do 40 hours a week for 11 months. And we also want to make sure that we don't have all 20 of our members doing emergency preparedness or all 20 of our members doing health education. So if we find a host site that's in a great location, great recruitment potential, but it might be the 15th host site that we have that's going to be doing emergency preparedness, we will probably put it on a list, and come back to it later. So that is something that we really take into consideration because, when you're filling out your grant applications for AmeriCorps, you want to make sure that you can provide that diversity with what your members are going to be doing. We also look at history as a host site. If this particular agency has hosted an AmeriCorps member before, either through our program or another program, we always consider that a good thing because they understand the time commitment that's involved in the paperwork that's involved, and we know that they're committed to making sure that that AmeriCorps member stays in the program and fulfills their duties. So we're always happy to have host sites that have been involved in the program before, and we like to make sure that our previous members were happy at that host site. We certainly don't want to put some more members at a host site that things didn't work well in the past. So those are the main things that we look at when we're selecting sites, and we have always had more host site requests than we have had positions available. So having this selection criteria also helps us to justify, the one agency that we could pick them over another, or, why someone wasn't selected over another program. And the other thing that we have in their application, which I think we're going to address here in a minute, but we do make sure that these sites understand from the beginning when they fill out their application form what their duties are going to be, and they have to actually sign an agreement that states they would be able to follow these requirements and provide supervision for the members. So that way we aren't bringing somebody on board and marketing for a particular position and then find out that they weren't really understanding what was going to be involved in the first place. So that is all something we take into consideration when we're selecting our host sites.
Well, thank you. Let's go back to the Encore collection. And Melissa, talk to us about how you identify and recruit potential hosts.
Sure. We used kind of informally some of what Kristen just talked about, but some of the things that we have found to be successful as a statewide program is to utilize current partners. Since we work with groups of schools and community organizations, getting them to identify potential partners they could work with. We also have done a lot of presenting at conferences to talk about our models for the program, which has allowed us to talk about the program, be an exhibitor, get the word out there as a way to recruit potentially new program sites. And we've also offered technical assistance meetings as part of the application process, which has really helped us to make sure that we talk about the program in a way that helps host sites then know, is it a good fit for them? And at the TA meetings, we talk about program design, evaluation expectations, how to best have them complete the application so they make sure to understand our expectations. And it's just been that has probably been the best tool, because that has really helped us weed out and also keep in folks who weren't really sure that they might be a good fit for us. So those are typically the things we do in terms of...
Okay, Melissa, you're fading out just a little bit, so I don't know if you need to be closer to your phone or what.
Sure. Well, did you hear me talk about the TA meeting?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
A little towards the end, you kind of dropped out a bit.
Okay. So what I said was just that has really helped us keep people in or out and help them identify that, yes, this is for sure what they would like to do, to have an AmeriCorps member.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yep.
Other resources within the collection include a memo that you could look at to potential sites, a site supervisor checklist. But let's move on to the next question, which is, what should my application procedure address? And some of the things that are available in the Encore collection is an example of a complete application packet, but some ideas on the kind of minimum of what you should include, and also what kind of information you might want to provide about your program. But Kristen, let's talk about what you include in your application materials.
Okay. The first thing that we include in our application for our host sites is that we do ask that they provide us a summary of all of the projects that the member would be working on. And again, we just want to make sure that they've thought this through and they actually have something for the member to work on, and that it would indeed keep the member busy for the 40 hours a week for the 11 months. And then we also use the position description that the host sites have come up with to market then for candidates for that position. So it kind of serves a dual purpose there. We also have the host sites come up with what their requirements for a candidate are. So, for instance, we have the Illinois Migrant Council just took on one of our AmeriCorps members. They needed someone who was fluent in Spanish so that they could go out to migrant farm workers and talk to them about health education. So we like to have specific things like that listed so that when we then market to the candidates, we know specifically if these people are going to meet what that host site is wanting. You know, most of the time they'll include things like being able to travel, they have their own transportation, good computer skills, things like that. But if they do have specific requirements that they want, like being able to speak Spanish, or if they have to be very good at Excel. We do have several of our members who work in epidemiology, and they collect data on various diseases. You have to be really good at Excel and things like that. So that is another thing that we ask the host sites to really think about what it is they want their candidate to have. And most of our candidates, we require at least 2 years of college education. I know not all programs do that, but because of the specific nature of what they're working in, they really do have to have some background in public health. The other thing, as I mentioned before, that we do have on our application form, we ask each of our host sites to write down what their need for our member is. And it really does serve two purposes. Again, we want the host sites to think about, do we really need someone full-time, and this can be a meaningful experience for them, a learning experience, or is it we just need, you know, a helping hand, like an intern person? But the other reason we have them come up with that need is that when I go to do our recompete applications for AmeriCorps, I go back to these host site application forms, and a lot of times we'll just take that need statement right out of that application form and put it into my grant application. So it does a lot of the work for me by having them do it. We also have them sign, like I mentioned before, we have them sign an agreement that they do understand what their responsibilities as a host site is going to be, so there's no surprises, though they always seem to come up with some, but that they would have to pay for travel, and that they've got to provide them with a computer and a phone and things like that, and that they would be able to provide them with daily supervision as well, because in the past, when we first began our program, there were issues where a member was just kind of brought into a host site and dropped and just said, here's your project, go work on it, and never really heard from their site supervisor again. So, you know, that's always good to have, and it's just another reminder for that host site of, okay, it is a big deal to have an AmeriCorps member, and we are going to be responsible for taking care of this person really for 11 months. So that's what we've got in our application form.
Well, thank you. Daryl, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. It's going back to that question of need, and we're just 3/4 into our very first year. So I was wondering, could you give me some examples, or one example of, in your mind, what would be a good need statement from an agency, and maybe what would be an unacceptable statement of need, just to give me an idea of what you're looking for.
Sure. Let me see, one that would show a good need. I'm trying to think of a specific one I've had come in. We did have one of our agencies, it is in a rural community, who had, they did not have someone who spoke Spanish who was able to go out into the schools and talk to the children of migrant workers about the importance of, you know, like brushing your teeth and going to the doctor, and working with the parents on keeping their kids healthy. They had no one on staff who spoke Spanish. And they did not, because health departments are mainly funded through the state, and our state is facing a terrible budget crisis, they did not have the money to hire a full-time person with those skills. But they did have enough money that they could hire on an AmeriCorps worker to create this health education in schools project. And so that was a need we thought was really great, and we thought, you know, when we go to reapply for an AmeriCorps grant, that would really grab those grant reviewers as, you know, this is an underserved population that our AmeriCorps member was able to go out and actually start a program in that community to serve those people. So that would be an example of a need we felt that was really good.
I agree. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah. Now, one that might not be one is just, you know, if somebody were to say, because I actually get this a lot of, we're just so overwhelmed and we're short-staffed. You know, to me that, I think a lot of places are short-staffed and overwhelmed, and so to me that just doesn't sound like they've really thought about where that AmeriCorps member is going to fit in the team and what they're really going to contribute. We do have a lot of agencies who, I think they still have this, you know, perception that AmeriCorps members are there to do filing and things like that, and we want them to understand that they've got to provide a direct service, and we want this to be a learning experience for the AmeriCorps member, and we want them to see how they have contributed to their community. So usually it's a big red flag to me when something just says we're short-staffed.
Well, thank you. Let's give Melissa an opportunity to talk about her application process.
Sure. It's very similar to what Kristen has. I would say that one of the things we really, you know, to try and answer that question about need, that's a huge part. We actually give, in our application for each of the questions we ask, we actually have, we weight them, and we weight the need question as one of the areas that we look at the most, that's what they need to spend their time on, talking about. Whether it's giving us demographic information of the students they'll serve and that kind of thing. The other kind
That's not me hungry because nothing sounds good.
So one of the other pieces has been making sure that we talk about our program goals and have the host sites describe how they will achieve our program goals as well as how it impacts and builds their capacity. And then the other piece that we really spend a lot of time looking at on our application is sustainability, and having them think before they even get an AmeriCorps member, how are they going to sustain the work in service that the member would provide. And then we also start to include things about AmeriCorps itself, introduction to the corporation, what members can and can't do, so they kind of start learning the lingo of national service. Some of the other things we do have a group review each application, so it's not just staff themselves looking at applications, but community partners who help us with making decisions about host sites. And then with every application, when we award a site, we actually provide written feedback about strengths of the application and areas of concerns that we need to, that they need to provide a written response to. And often that's they need to rewrite the position description, they need to ensure that there'll be supervision on a daily basis, that kind of thing.
Excellent, thank you. Well, let's go on to the next question, which is, what should my application procedure address? There are some comments being posted in the chat section. We'll share those towards the end of the webinar. So the question is, how do I develop host site agreements? So here we have a short description of a process for do that, as well as an example of a formal contract with a site. What we'll do is we'll go to the form that Kristen uses. Now this form is not part of the Encore collection, but we will be sharing it with you via email. So Kristen, talk to us about this form.
Sure. This is just a real basic two-page form that we use as our host site agreement, and a lot of it, again, goes over what we had in our application form, and it's just really to reiterate what we expect the host site to do. But it also talks about, you know, what the prohibited activities of the members are, so that they are clear up front, again, that the members, you know, like they can't do legislative work and things like that. And then it also lets the partner know what IPHA as an administrative office will be doing for the members, you know, as far as taking care of trainings and travel during those trainings and providing pay and things like that. And also stated in our agreement is a line that talks about we have a host site investment fee that each of our host sites actually provides to our agency to have someone there. And so we do list that investment fee in our agreement and the date by which they agree to have that paid to us. And we also talk about the different reporting that the host sites will have to do as far as evaluations and timesheets and things like that. And yeah, I think you're up to what we agree to do, and it goes over, you know, providing health insurance, a living stipend, liability coverage, providing orientation, and doing site visits and things like that. So it's just a real basic 2-page document that we use, and we send this out with our congratulations letters to the agencies that have been selected as host sites. We go ahead and have this sent in, and we have them sign it and return it to us, and we have to have this on file before we will begin marketing for their particular position, so that we know that supposedly they've read this over and that they understand what they'll be responsible for.
Excellent. It sounds like you really put a lot of effort into making sure the host site clearly understands their responsibilities and what they're committing to.
Definitely, and you would be surprised, even with the application form, with the partner agreement, and then we do have a host site orientation where we go over these again. You know, I don't know if it's just the complexity of AmeriCorps or if people are just so busy, but you would be surprised by the people who are, oh, I didn't know that. And it's like, okay, how many times do we have to go over it? But, you know, we figure the more times we can go over it, the better, you know, hopefully we'll be covered in the end.
So just a reminder to mute your phones if you're not talking, cut down on some background noise. So let's go back to the Encore collection while Melissa talks about her approach to developing host site agreements.
Sure. One of the things that we have done is get feedback from our state commission to make sure we are sending kind of the same messages to host sites that they are looking for. We've talked to other programs, and kind of the main parts of it are very similar to Kristen's, that we have program roles, so what we as an organization do, and expectations for the site itself as well as for the supervisor. Sometimes sites need a little help in being intentional about incorporating the member into communications and kind of the office process, so kind of outlining what we expect with that. Expectations for the supervisor, and each of ours is longer than 2 pages. It's actually more like 8, because we separate each of those roles out so that it's very clear that the host site is expected to, you know, provide space and mileage reimbursements and that kind of thing, and then the supervisor reporting requirements, supervision, how we want them to orient the member, ongoing requirements of meetings that they have to attend with the program staff, host site visits, that kind of thing. We also include the financial information. We do have a cash match that we ask our host sites to provide. And so what happens, then the policies are around what happens if a member leaves early and the cash match hasn't been paid. That kind of information is provided. And then we also ask that they sign a copy, we sign a copy, and then we each get, you know, a signed copy of the agreement. And then one of the other things that we do is we create for each of the host sites a file, which includes this information, our correspondence, so the award letter that they receive, invoices, copies of invoices that we send for the cash match, so that all of that is in one place that is separate from the member documentation. So if there are questions, we can, you know, go back and just look at the host site information.
Excellent, thank you. So let's move on to the 4th question. How do I conduct site visits and track performance? In this part of the Encore collection, there's resources on how one program uses questions to conduct and organize his site visit, as well as how to go about informing sites and a checklist for documenting your site visit. We'll start with Kristen again and talk to us about how you conduct site visits and track performance.
Sure. We only conduct one site visit per year. A lot of this is due to the fact that we are spread out over such a large area, and we only have 1.5 staff persons dedicated to AmeriCorps, so it makes it very difficult to actually get to the site more than once a year. But we do stay in daily contact with our members via email and our host sites via email, phone, you know, that sort of thing. And when we conduct our site visits, we usually do it about the halfway point of the year. And by that time, not only will we have received emails or phone calls, you know, with questions or concerns, but we will have also received 2 member evaluations, which will give us an idea of, is the member meeting up with the host site's expectations of what they should be doing. And we also have our members send in quarterly journals to the staff. No one else sees them except for myself and my assistant. And these journals are the members' way of telling us, you know, whether or not they're enjoying what's going on at the host site. So by the time we conduct our visit, we kind of know the dynamics of what is going on there. We don't have we have a list of questions, but they aren't, you know, like a formal checklist of questions. It's really just an informal visit. We visit individually with the host site supervisor for about a half hour or so, and then we'll go and meet with the member individually. And we just find out from them, you know, how are things going? Are each of them happy with the experience? What concerns do they have about either the host site or the member? If we have discovered through evaluations or quarterly journals that, you know, the host site is not giving this member the work that they had said they would do, you know, we question that host site. You know, in the application you said you were going to have the member do this. Why haven't they done that? What is your timetable for getting them, you know, involved in this project? And we also, you know, then would talk with the member as far as if there were any issues with them. You know, you're not arriving on time, or you're not putting a lot of effort into your work, that sort of thing. So, like I said, our site visits are pretty informal. We want to find out what the member plans on doing when they're done with the AmeriCorps term of service. We can find out if they're interested in doing another year, if the host site is interested in coming on another year. And then, like I said, we do 3 member evaluations throughout the year. We have a form that we have our host sites complete electronically. Then they sit down with their AmeriCorps member, review that evaluation. They both have to sign it, and then they return it to my attention. And we do keep track of the member's score on those evaluations throughout the year, just to make sure that they have progressed throughout the year on their score. And then at the end of the year, we provide the members as well as the host sites with an end-of-the-year survey form for them each to complete, just about our program, the host site, you know, the experience overall, what the member is going to be doing once they leave. These are all things that pertain to our performance measures in our grant application, but it's also a way that we can then look and say, okay, well, we aren't doing this very well, or this particular system is working very well for marketing or evaluating or whatever. And so those end-of-the-year evaluations really help us know as a staff where we are with the program.
Okay, thank you. Well, Melissa, let's take a look at what you do. You do have an email that you send to the site supervisor to prepare them for a visit. Let's take a look at that email, and you talk to us about it.
Sure. Well, we send an email. Well, we start talking about site visits in orientation, so they kind of know that this is going to be happening at a particular point in the year. We try and do it around halfway through the year. We found that most members by that point have a program, and programs are up and running. And we really try and take the focus away from it being evaluation to being more of a conversation, kind of like what Kristen talked about. And so we send out an email a couple times just to get them thinking about it, and it goes over the different pieces of the visit. It's usually an interview with the member. We talk both with the member and supervisor, and then the supervisor. And we also ask for a tour of the facilities, since many of our members serve in schools or in communities, that we try and get a sense of what does it feel like for the member to be there on a day-to-day basis. And so we found that members and supervisors are able to kind of arrange their schedules to have these conversations, and then, we go out as staff and do them regularly. We also send the questions that we're going to ask them ahead of time so that they have, for some folks, that's how they learn and feel a little bit less anxious about the visit itself if they have kind of a grounding of what kinds of questions. And they're very much tied to what we ask on their progress reports, what we talk about in our monthly meetings, trainings, so that they know kind of how to answer the questions, and they're familiar with them, as well as checking in about, are they really fulfilling the program goals. So for some of them, it can be kind of an accountability piece that they're reminded, oh, yes, that's right, I need to be working on this. I maybe haven't done that. So we look at the member, kind of their personal development, as well as the service activities they're doing. And then also we get feedback as a program, what are things that they think we need to be doing better as well. Some of the other things that we make sure in our site visits that we do are just making sure that we get as much opportunity for the member to talk about their successes as well as concerns as well. And then, okay, great, I was going to go there next. The other thing that we do as a staff is we bring with us kind of a checklist or evaluation of the host site itself that we don't necessarily share with the host site, but it helps us to be thinking of things that for host sites we want to make sure they're in compliance with. So it has things, we want to know, are they, being a good host site in terms of paperwork? Are they responsive? Does it appear that the member is really part of the host site? Is there supervision adequate? And we have these kind of major areas in the back of our heads as we're going through the site visit, and then when we're done with the visit, we actually will fill it out and put it as part of the host site file. And this rubric really helps us to make sure that we are making sure that host sites are in compliance with AmeriCorps regulations, and then that we are following through. If they're not, what are some improvement plans? When we're done with the host site, we'll often take our notes from this checklist and incorporate that into a written feedback that we give to the member and to the supervisor about what we see. You're doing really great in these areas, but there are other areas that you need to work on, and let's come up with a plan for how you can do that more effectively. So we have both the introduction, the questions for the visit, and then this other tool that helps us make sure that everybody's kind of fulfilling the requirements that we have put out from the beginning.
Excellent, thank you. Let's go back to the website and talk about the last question. How do I evaluate sites at the end of the year? So two main sources for feedback information is from, one is from site supervisors and one is from the members themselves. So again, we'll start with Kristen. We have several files to look at, one that is part of the Encore collection and then an updated version of that file. So let me pull up the first one that's part of the collection. Let's see, end of year.
Yeah, and oops, I kind of went ahead and already did this, but I'll do it again.
That's okay, you can just do
I
it.
forgot that it was on another question.
That's all right.
As I mentioned, yeah, the one you're looking at now is actually our old one, our old end of the year evaluation, but we do provide evaluation forms to our members just to find out you know, how they thought the program was run, what suggestions they might have for the program. For instance, one that we get every single year is because we are a statewide agency or statewide program, our members are located, there's only one member at each host site. And so they always say, well, if you could have it so we were together more often, that would be great. But those are the kinds of things we look for of you know, do you need more communication? Do we need to have more conference calls and emails? Did you think that the trainings we were provided were adequate? What are some training topics you would suggest for the coming years? Just different things like that. Would they recommend that host site again? And if not, why? And then we do have a host site end of the year survey as well, making sure that the host sites understand what the program was all about. Do they think having an AmeriCorps member at their agency made a difference in the community? Did they feel that as a staff we provided them with enough information? Did we keep in contact with them on a regular basis? Do they feel that the program's effective? And let's see, what other things do we ask them? Just really, you know, what they felt about our program and how they think we're running it, and if they have suggestions on how we could help them as a host site, you know, what different techniques of communicating and things like that might be more effective. So then what we'll do is once we get all of the evaluations in, one of the staff members will sit down and compile the results from those, and then myself, my associate, and our executive director will sit down, go over the results, and you know, there's always going to be those one or two that somebody throws you a curveball response and you don't really take it into much consideration. But you know, we look for a pattern of was it effective, was it not effective, what things do we need to change, and things like that.
And you also have this exit interview.
Yes, and that's the one that we now use for our members. The very first one was an old exit interview that we use for our members. This is the new one that we actually use now. And this was actually created because AmeriCorps now requires you to do internal and external evaluations of your program during your grant year. And so we actually have used our exit forms from our members and our host sites over the last 2 years as a way to compile our evaluation to meet our grant requirements.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, well let's let Melissa talk about the forms you use. You also have a number that we can open up and look at.
Sure. Ours are kind of take a slightly different focus. We really look at the members. The member gets to evaluate the host site themselves and just how their experience was. We do it at the midpoint and at the end of the year. We're probably going to do it 3 times this coming year. But it is supervision. You know, did the member get a chance to have access to the resources they need? Was there training? Was it a flexible place? And the member then reviews that to to just check in with their supervisor about how things are going. We also ask them to have the supervisor sign off so that we know that they've had a conversation about it. And it also helps us in planning for the next year in terms of, training needs and that kind of thing for both the site and the member. And then the member evaluation, we also ask the host site to evaluate the member, which helps us to also identify where are areas we need to do a little bit more training and coaching in of the member and the supervisor or host site. And it, it has things like initiative, responsibility, programs, goals, relationships with community members, the different pieces of the project that they really need to do well. And then again, the member and supervisor have to have a conversation about it. So the evaluations we use are very much a tool for professional development for both the host site and the member. Excellent.
And this is the form that's currently in the collection, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is your updated form that you now use.
Correct, yep, which is actually as a result of looking at the information in the Encore collection. Some of the things that were there really helped us to revise it.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. And again, these documents that are currently not part of the collection, we will be sending to you via email. So we've gone through the major section on working with host sites, from identifying, recruiting potential hosts to establishing an application procedure, developing host site agreements, conducting site visits and tracking performance, and then evaluating sites at the end of the year. We do have time for some questions if you have them. So do folks have any questions for our two presenters? Either we have filled their brains up and or they're very shy, or we've done a good job. Or we've done a good job and they're very shy. Well, Tim, you posted a chat about defining community need and how you're actually requiring sites to provide credible sources such as census data. So thank you for sharing that. I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Yeah, it's. I think in the application process, people are sometimes.
Okay, you're a little soft. So if you could move closer to your phone.
Okay. Is this any better?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with Habitat, I mean, a lot of times our local affiliates get really passionate, and they sometimes include data that was maybe used for a sophomore project at a local community college centered around the poverty housing and the need in that particular area. And the weird thing is that it's not just in one particular geographic area. Laredo, for instance, which is the third most poverty-stricken area in the United States by census data, they didn't use census data for that support mechanism to make that application really strong when it went up for review. And so all I was trying to say is that make sure, at least one of the things that I'm making sure of is that when people make claims about need or poverty housing or lack of education or especially in Texas the language barrier, that they have census data or some credible source, not just some sophomoric study that somebody did that wasn't ever really fact-checked.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Other questions or comments or things that you folks have learned along the way that you'd like to share? All right. Well, I'll take that to mean there are no additional questions. So again, how do you access Encore? It is through the Resource Center. There is a link off of that. We are considered a collection of that Resource Center. You can always, of course, bookmark the URL, and we will be providing that in the follow-up email. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you. And if you have any questions or need any support around supporting your members, do feel free to give us a call. I'll provide some contact information in the follow-up email as well. Thank you to Kristen and Melissa for sharing your experiences with us. Very nice of you to do that and spend time with us. And with that, we'll close the webinar.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Okay.
Bye.
Excellent. All right.
Great.
Cool.
I'm still here. Adam.
Wow. What do you think, Adam?
I thought it went well.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I will finish drafting that email and update